remember when exactly I learned the rudiments of music theory, and I definitely don't remember most of what I learned, but I do remember the time that I learned the different triads that you get out of the C major scale, starting with, obviously, C major, and then D minor, E minor, so far so good, F major, G major, A minor, and then there was always this odd one out, this B diminished triad, before you get back to C major. And of course, B diminished always stuck out like a sore thumb, not just because it had a different name and it sounds rather different, but you always hear about this or that piece being in a key, this sonata is in E flat major, this concerto is in F sharp minor, but you never hear about a piece in so-and-so diminished. And I remember at 7 years old wondering, is there a composer out there who ever wrote a piece in B diminished? I mean, can you imagine a triumphant coda in B diminished? Sounds like one giant question mark. That's just the B diminished harmonies. What about the surrounding harmonies? Well, we could get a first approximation by taking an existing piece in C major and shifting everything down a step, not on the chromatic scale, but on the diatonic scale. For example, here is Beethoven's third piano sonata. Shift that over a step and you would get this. Or you could take an existing piece in B flat major, for example, the second concerto, and keep the E flats if you want, but unflat all the B flats. Both of those sound pretty weird, but at least that gives us a baseline. So now let's think about starting from scratch. The issue is that the B diminished chord is inherently unstable. It's begging to be resolved into a more stable, normal major or minor chord. Think of it like a ball at the top of a hill as opposed to at the bottom of a valley. The diminished chord sounds precarious. So if you want to drive home that B diminished is the home key, you can't allow other chords to compete with it for stability. So that means keeping major and minor chords to an absolute minimum and writing other diminished chords or various sevenths or semi-dissonant harmonies. So with that as a guideline, let's play around a bit in B diminished. You know what this suggests to me? Bewilderment and confusion. This sounds like a guy running around who has no idea where he is or what he's supposed to be doing. And maybe that could be a useful musical effect in some situation, but I think the precariousness of the diminished triad would be better used in a mysterious and suspenseful slow movement. If we're saying that this sonata is in B diminished, let's say the slow movement is in E diminished. There's another problem with the diminished triad, which is that you don't actually hear it by itself in classical music nearly as much as you hear it in combination with one other note. For example, the B diminished triad you'll most often hear together with a G, giving you the G, whatever they call it, dominant seventh, I guess, or together with an A flat, giving you a diminished seventh. So just then, as I was fooling around in E diminished, I was constantly tempted to slip into diminished seventh harmonies. So instead of this, you get this extra note. And you can play around endlessly in diminished sevenths. But the problem with going into diminished sevenths is there's sort of peak ambiguity, and you don't know that you are in fact in E diminished, because this one chord could be E diminished, or G diminished, or B flat diminished, or C sharp diminished. So if you want to establish that you really are specifically in E diminished, you would have to avoid the diminished seventh chords. I could also see the diminished triad harmony as being the basis of a sarcastic scherzo type movement. Like this. Ultimately, though, I think the problem, if you're trying to avoid the diminished seventh world and write specifically in B diminished or whatever, is that to establish it as specifically B diminished, you have to hint at the adjoining keys of C major, C minor, A minor. But the gravitational pull of those normal major and minor chords is so strong that any one of them will quickly overpower any sense of B diminished as your home key. So you know what? I honestly have no idea where this is going, so I'm just going to say completion of this sonata is left as an exercise for the listener. Have fun.